So welcome everybody, my name is Peter Chittum. I am the Director of Technical Content at Salesforce Bend. And this is our security panel. I've been excited about this for weeks, knowing that we were going to do this, because this story has been ongoing. It's something that Salesforce Bend has been talking about since May, June on a regular basis because of news that keeps trickling out about more and more of the compromises and how it's affecting Salesforce customers, Salesforce users, and certainly also partners, without a doubt. So with that, let's jump in and meet our panelists. First off, we have James Burgess, CEO and founder of Application Perfection. We also have Dan Ferrugia, COO of Orion Global Solutions, and Vivek Narayan. I'm sorry, I totally missed it. I practiced it like 10 times too. Narayan, co-founder of Kainai Solutions. So, I'll just give each of you, a few seconds to talk a little bit about who you are, how you got into doing what you're doing, and then a little bit about each of your companies. So, you want to start us off, James?
Sure, thanks, Peter. Hi, I'm James from Application Perfection, Polish cloud consultant. Been working in the ecosystem for about 15 years. We've got a range of apps up in the App Exchange that help you manage your Salesforce security permissions and reports. Really pleased to be here.
Thanks, James.
Hi everybody, my name is Dan Ferrugia. I'm the COO of Orion Global Solutions. We're a systems integrator out of New York. We're focused on financial services implementations, retail and consumer goods implementations. I got into the ecosystem about 10 years ago when we started the company. But prior to that, I was in the Microsoft ecosystem doing Microsoft Dynamics CRM implementations. And before that, I did a lot of merger and acquisition work.
I'm Vivek Narayan, co-founder of Kainai Solutions. I've been a former Salesforce employee and started my own consulting firm, really just out of the need of, when I worked at Salesforce, I saw there was just a gap in terms of partners truly understanding what clients are trying to solve, and building a strong relationship with our clients to evolve and adapt into wherever they want to go. And as we started off with analytics, we moved into the security space as we saw that as a need, and seeing some successes around that as well. So looking forward to this discussion. It's a pretty exciting topic, as usually security is.
It is a bit of a sleeper, it seems. But again, it is absolutely current in the news today. Just a recap for those of you who aren't familiar with what is going on with this breach. As I mentioned in my little warm-up, in March there was a Salesforce article that, I don't know if anybody noticed it, talking about certain instances of connected apps being vulnerable to social engineering attacks for Salesforce customers. I didn't become aware of it until Google Threat Intelligence posted about it on their blog, and we started picking it up and following it at Salesforce Bend, and have been reporting on it ever since. That was around the May-June timeframe. And since then, it's just been like watching a slow motion snowball as far as how big this has gotten. Most recently, we've had ransoms being requested from customers and from Salesforce. As I mentioned, there are now 39 known customers that have been subject to this breach. Hundreds of millions of records have been exfiltrated. A lot of those are now posted on the dark web, apparently, as of this last week. Salesforce has taken the position of not cooperating or paying the ransom, so I think that's certainly a very bold and I would argue the right thing to be doing, even though that's a very difficult decision. As of now, the threat group, which is comprised of 3 separate threat actors, have now said that they're going to stop going about these compromises, and they've now decided to crowdsource an email campaign where they've said that they will pay people to email the CEOs of these compromised companies in order to annoy them into paying the ransom. So that's the backdrop on which we're having this discussion. And just to back that up with a little statistic, because data I think helps, I was looking through some information about this, and HackerOne, the HackerOne website reckons that the average cost of a data breach for a company is somewhere around $5.45 million when you take into account the ransom, the cleanup, and everything else that's involved in that. So, there's our backdrop, folks. To kick this off, let's just go around and have each of you talk a little bit about what are some key lessons that we can take away from this data breach. And you know, it's not even past tense, we're still in the middle of it, but even still I think there must be some lessons for people out there that they can think about today. Who'd like to kick us off? Anyone? Yeah, okay.
Yeah. So I think I think as you said, we're definitely still in the middle of it, right? And you know, I think and also how you kicked this off was really I think in a good way is you know, do we talk about security today? I think there were certain things in this particular vulnerability which really exploited the web to lead functionality that, you know, had there been a focus on security and really not even security, just how you're configuring Salesforce, specifically in, let's call it in the web to lead functionality, when you're building out these the fields, is putting some restrictions around the field, right? In this particular case, they exploited the description field. You could put, you know, a lot of characters in that field, and they were able to put instructions in there. So I think about what we do on a daily basis, and we have a responsibility to our customers so that when we are building out that type of functionality, which is standard in probably every single one of our customers, that we are using best practices in order to implement that functionality so that it can't be exploited later on by really any exploitation. In this particular case, AI, which is fairly, you know, new to the industry and the ecosystem, being used this way. So I think there are other things definitely that we'll get to, I think, in questions coming up. But I think, you know, when you look at just thinking about how you're configuring things, there's the business use case for the customer. There's what the customer tells you, and then there's being a consultant to the customer and saying, this is really the thing you should be thinking about because it's a best practice from a security perspective.
Thanks a lot, Dan. Vivek, you wanted to jump into?
Yeah, I'll just add at a more broader level. I think there's just this assumption that our clients have around, you know, once they've gone through the process of acquiring Salesforce licenses, they can trust whatever happens going forward. I remember asking one of my clients, the first slide that I had was, how well do you trust your Salesforce? And she said, I'll be honest, I never even thought of that question because, you know, once you sign off with all the check marks, you think that you're good to go. But it's pretty clear in this day and age, security is going to constantly evolve. And you know, with AI especially, you're going to have new ways where people attack your organization. So you need to be prepared for those scenarios. It's really a journey, not just a point in time.
Yeah, it's interesting. There was a post on LinkedIn a while back that, you know, was a great way of thinking about it. That your Salesforce org is 100% secure up until the moment you first log into it. Anything to add to that, please?
Well, I think I highlight the need for the principle of least privilege. I think we mentioned the field level security, and there's a lot that the org will be configured to prevent like the impact of the data breach by looking down the fields, by making sure that API only had access to certain parts of the data rather than wide open. So I think that there's a lot that you can do of a preventative nature before the data breach happens.
Yeah. Excellent. And you know, Dan, you brought up the word responsibility. And one of the things I wanted to bring us in this first section here is also to talk about, you know, exactly what some of you said, which is we think of Salesforce as this trusted platform. You know, how is it that a trusted platform can still be vulnerable to a breach like this? And you know, that word responsibility dovetails in with the shared responsibility model, I think. So I'd love to hear all of you comment a little bit about that too. Do you want to jump back in, please?
Yeah, sure. So, I mean, Salesforce is a massive platform these days. It's massively configurable. We work with companies that have got thousands of different types of permissions. So the chance of user error in terms of how your permissions are configured is massive. And it's putting in those best practices to prevent it.
Yeah, I would say for decades, trusted platforms, some like Microsoft, for example. I mean, I started my career in the infrastructure world, so part of my job was patching Microsoft servers for weekends, and so this isn't new to our world of technology. It's just it's sort of wrapped up in a different package. I guess is how I would put it. And I think the other thing is with Salesforce, as opposed to patching a bunch of servers, which is really the responsibility of an IT group, there's a different sense of responsibility, not just in the IT world, but also to your actual business units now, right? Especially because we're putting so much in their hands. Whether it's determining the type of instruction that might be put into a field, and just noticing when there might be some exploitation there. And I think that's a big distinction between, maybe something like Salesforce and something like an enterprise operating system that you're patching, and something like artificial intelligence, and which is very much user-centric and hitting the business users, versus your central and shared information technology.
I'll add, Salesforce is going on now for about 20 plus years. How it was set up to begin with to where technology is today, and along the way, how your users have leveraged the platform, what they build on it, the code, etc. And then the APIs. There are so many different ways you now expose your business to the external world. And so, while it is a trusted platform, I think it's very important to always review your security posture and then really have a plan with a group of with a lot of team members in your organization to ensure that there aren't any vulnerabilities that we're missing as technology evolves. So on our end, really, I'll give an example where we're using Google, for example, for some of our authentication stuff, and I was asking for my team members, how do we know if that is also enough? And so having these discussions, the awareness, and reviewing and having these security audits is going to be very important for everyone to consider as an ongoing basis.
100%. What you just said there, Vivek, also made me think of technical debt. And I think moving into the next section, we do want to talk about, from a technology standpoint, what are the things that customers should be thinking about. So what are the features that your customers are maybe asking about or that you're starting to roll out for them? And are there any must-haves that you feel like every Salesforce customer should be enabling or making use of this feature?
Yeah, I mean, for sure that there are many features within Salesforce that you should have enabled, but one of the most important ones would be around mutual authentication. I would say these are certificates, really, between the client and the server. It's basically like a handshake, and it happens every time the end user's interacting with the platform. Having that set up will at least reduce a lot of the some of the easiest ways to attack your org. The other, in terms of like some of the features or requests that we've seen with some of our clients, one of the most important ones was just reviewing the user access level. So just doing a quick search on who has what access. Very easily when projects happen and take place, like the tech that we're talking about, to complete these projects quickly, you don't realize some of the check marks that have been given off, to someone to have the ability to go in and make changes. Have those been closed out, or those even approved to begin with? So having a view into that, we were able to at least identify in advance, like, hey, there's some individuals in your org that have access to certain things that they shouldn't have. And so it is very important to really go back and review not just your user profiles, but also some of the legacy code that you have out there.
Excellent. And I'll just add one thing to that, and maybe along the Agentforce talk track. So we're an Agentforce service partner, and so we've been doing some implementations of Agentforce, and I think one of the things that's important as a consulting organization is that we're training users on how to use some of the tools. Like on the Einstein Trust Layer, there's audit logs, so you can review conversations that are happening within Agentforce. But that really is on us as a search partner and an organization, very few organizations that are rolling out Agentforce to really train our users on how to use those tools.
You want to add to that?
The key security feature for me is just multi-factor authentication. The number of companies that don't implement it, it's so easy to do. Everyone has a smartphone these days. Switch it on, prevent sure the impact of your privileged users being hacked. It's a great feature, very quick.
Yeah, excellent. So one of the things that can come along with security is friction, right? And I think one thing that probably a lot of customers might bring into the discussion is how to balance security with user experience. So yeah, I'd love to hear you all reflect on that a little bit. And I think, how do you convince the users that secure is good user experience?
Well,
Yeah.
I mean, the key thing for me is I talk to business and understand the business needs. So the concept of the least privilege is a great one, but equally for small businesses you might have, let's say, 6 salespeople. In reality, they probably talk to each other every day, they have pipeline reviews, they know each other's data. So really, it's a collaboration there more than trying to give them just access or any opportunities. Probably is. But then you look at a bigger firm where they might have, let's say, 200 salespeople in a team aligned by industry or by role or company size. And then you really can put in a permissions model that gives them access to what they need. And it can actually enhance the usability of the system because by restricting access to the data, the users can find the data they need more easily. So yeah.
That is true. I mean, using roles and row-based security or record-based security does, by limiting access, you're essentially giving your users less to have to sift through in order to find the data that's relevant to them. So I think that's a really good point, especially when faced with the additional overhead of having to implement roles and sharing. So yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Anyone else want to jump in on that? Should we move on?
When you initially asked that question around user experience, I was actually thinking of the end users, like the clients or the customers. One of the most important things that you can, well, I know we're talking about employees, but at the same time, if you showcase to your customers that you are in fact focused on their security and their data, that is also something that would impact your bottom line and your revenue as well. And so if you kind of enable that mindset to your organization, at that point, security is no longer seen as an additional layer, but really as an importance for your business to function. So that's just one of the ways I would think about when it comes to enabling your entire organization to embrace the importance of security.
Yeah, 100%. So let's get into best practices. And to cue this one up, Again, going back to the HackerOne report that I was reading, so they were reporting that the life cycle of a data breach incident is on average 34 days. So imagine basically swinging the doors wide open for people to access your data for 34 days. And that it's 30 times more expensive to fix a vulnerability after an incident has taken place versus before. And I think when you think about that, it's really important to consider what are best practices. So to start that off, what are some common mistakes when configuring Salesforce security?
For me, you tend to find that when a Salesforce customer first goes live, they have a very well-defined security model. So it's defined, it's documented. Day two, the business realizes how easy configuring Salesforce is. Then you start having functionality, new users, meeting different business requirements. And then day two, your permissions will need to evolve. And then it's not documented and maintained. And then over years, you've got admins coming in, consultants, developers, layering permissions, and they're doing the right thing, they're giving users access. You end up with this mess of all the permissions that no one knows quite what they do. And poor admins trying to work out what everything does. So it's great to go live with a clean permissions model at the start, but then you need to maintain it and have regular reviews and stay on top of it. Otherwise it causes a lot of problems down the line.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, I think I would echo all of that. I mean, we're constantly balancing. Hey, we want to get this out. We want to get this, implemented immediately. And one of the first things that customers will say is just leave the security model open, and really convincing them that that's not the right thing to do, and consulting in that way. And then yeah, it's ongoing. We have managed services. And part of our managed services is to constantly do security reviews. In the case of this particular vulnerability, look at your whitelist, make sure that they're cleaned up, and then field level security, like we talked about before.
Yeah, I would add to that as well. I think one of the most common mistakes that I've seen organizations make is not really bringing in everyone together on a regular basis to discuss the security policies to what's happening at the ground level. I think what's very common is you're working through these projects, you're trying to complete things on time, and not being incentivized really to consider the security implications of this, because it's an additional step that now they have to factor. That takes time. That is that's unfortunately a mistake to make, and I think it's important to have that ongoing review with the entire organization, and not just assuming just because you have a CISO, everything is secure.
Yeah, Vivek, you were, when we were talking before this, you were mentioning that you had some examples of how can teams actually work better together, especially where teams are more diverse, where it's not just a developer or an admin, but then you maybe have a security team. So I was curious to hear some of your experience with that.
Yeah, so it's important to have ongoing meetings with IT security, with your system admins, your architects, your developers, because and it's really just starting the conversation on a regular basis. And I'm talking about as frequently as quarterly to shorter than monthly, on a monthly basis, where what are some of the projects that we're working on, and how are we working through with what kind of technology or connected apps and APIs that we need to consider that we're exposing our data to. And you'll identify a lot of mistakes that have been made. I mean, one of them that we identified was what's called a God mode, which essentially was how it was written within their Apex code. And it exposed their object, and essentially it had the chance of exposing their object to the community portal app, where once the user logs in, if they're able to call that API, they can get access to their objects. And without knowing how they're going about building out, like using outdated code, this is how you fall into these traps. So it's very important to have these ongoing discussions with
the idea of dot mode in a customer-facing or in a publicly-facing experience site in Apex, like the hair is standing up in the background. So,
Yeah, do you mind if I add something to that? So I speak from the implementation partner perspective. One of the things we put in place about 2 years ago was we have an internal advisory board. So every single project that goes through our organization goes through 4 stages. The first stage that we do that we conduct is we bring peers into a room, people that aren't part of the project, so other solution architects, technical architects, and the team that's doing the implementation and building that blueprint, they present the blueprint. So the architecture, and part of that is presenting the security model. What that allows us to do is poke holes into the actual architecture and the security model to make sure that there isn't just this one view into the actual architecture and the security model, but now you've got other folks looking at it to make sure that we don't have any gaps.
yeah, and so what I hear all three of you saying, in unison, is regular communication between and across teams and stakeholders. Yeah.
I think the key point there is it involves your InfoSec stakeholders as well. So you might be InfoSec, might be compliance, might be the SOX team. They'll be happy to advise. I think sometimes admin is going to be a bit overwhelmed by the detail of the security. It might not be that skill, that's why I'm talking to business stakeholders. But get InfoSec involved, get them internal audit, and they'll give you advice. So yeah, we can as many stakeholders as possible.
Yeah, I think, a lot of InfoSec professionals probably feel like they're doing their job alone oftentimes, and I would think if they knew they had an ally in the Salesforce administrator or the Salesforce team, I think that would be a really, really strong play. So let's wrap up with business culture and people. And I wanted to start with a quote from Reid Hoffman: "For every dollar you invest in technology, invest 3 in people." Now, James and Dan, I know you each had something that you wanted to share about what does it look like to build a security-first team in a company, or also around a Salesforce org. Dan, you want to kick off?
Yeah, I'll kick it off. So we saw the importance of this many years ago within our own organization. We have, as I said before, we have a responsibility to our customers. We have access to customer data, and that data spans not just CRM data. Sometimes we have access to their ERP information, when we're doing integrations or we're doing data migrations. So internally, we invested in a platform called Upfront, which gamifies the security aspect of our organization, and that goes from everybody from human resources, our financial team, our executive team. Everybody is constantly being tested throughout the year, and they're earning badges. So there's definitely there's a sense of good sportsmanship on this, but people really look at that and they each want to have more points and more badges. And that's been something that we invested in, and it's something we talk about with our customers. I think the other thing to think about is internally we have cyber insurance, so everybody knows it. We talk about it with our customers. These are things that your customers are always asking for, and everybody's really always really thinking about that. And just a quick story. Salesforce aside, we've had situations where emails are coming from high-level senior people to go do things with corporate credit cards or go pay an invoice that's not real. And I will say that since we've implemented Upfront and we've made people aware that those incidences where people actually go and try to do those things or question to go do those things have dropped significantly.
That sounds good. I may talk to Ben McCarthy about getting that for us. Do you want to share a little bit about that too, James?
Yeah, I mean, for me, it's the broader company culture as well. If you've got a happy team that invests in the business to do well, then it becomes an educational piece of what is described. If your broader company culture isn't great, and your employees are disgruntled or they're not happy with the business, then that's like being protected. Whereas if if the team are engaged, so they're working the accountant to get the business or it's just education.
Yeah, I think what I hear often is training, awareness, and culture as the big three things. Obviously, technology part of that as well. And I've definitely heard that from all of you today. Is there anyone want to jump in for just a last word on how we can build organizations that turn people into their strongest security asset as opposed to their weakest link? For training, we've heard awareness.
I'll just take that quote that you mentioned where you should invest $3 into your people and maybe just say that perhaps we should start thinking about how do we take maybe 50 cents and incentivize our employees to now consider security as a topic. It's not something that we think about, but what is the cost of that incentive versus the cost of the actual attack that happens afterwards, right? And I think for too long there's been this sense of this culture where if we don't know about it, we won't be we can avoid those losses because we didn't know about it. So it's really even hard for people in the organizations to bring up vulnerabilities because they know that once it's out there on paper somewhere that hey, there's this risk. Now we have to address it. But I think if we actually look at a way where we can incentivize our the overall workforce around this, even if it's a small piece to it, I think that's going to really set the stage for success for your organization.
Fantastic. Well, final word to you, Vivek. Thanks very much. So, thanks again to our panel. Jake Burgess, Dan Ferrugia, Vivek Narayan. Thanks very much, and hopefully everybody got something from that.
Thank you.
Do a great rest of your week.